Houston's top cop ousted. Popular Chief Troy Finner steps down amid the heavy scrutiny surrounding 250,000 abandoned criminal cases. Pushback. A long overdue labor deal brokered by the mayor with firefighters, questioned by the controller and some on council. And a major local school district completely culling controversial topics from its K-12 academic curriculum. I'm Greg Groogan, and welcome to What's Your Point, where our panelists call it like they see it. Let's greet them. Starting us off, Holly Hansen, political reporter for The Texan. Next up, writer and public policy consultant Charles Blaine. In the 3 spot, longtime super neighborhood leader Tamara Bell. Batting cleanup, well-known businessman and columnist for Real Clear Politics, Bill King. And closing us out, education and public safety advocate Paul Castro. Let's begin.
It's my responsibility to provide public safety for all Houstonians, and the decision was made.
Mayor John Whitmire addressing what was pretty clearly the forced retirement of Houston Police Chief Troy Finner amid the ongoing department-wide scandal over more than 250,000 criminal allegations that were simply never investigated. Whitmire appeared committed to keeping Finner at the helm until evidence emerged this week that the chief was at least aware cases were being abandoned without investigations 3 years earlier than he'd very publicly reported.
I was sick when I saw the recent email, but I don't have time to be sick. I have to protect this city and lead.
Deeply liked and respected by most on city council, Finner's departure was genuinely painful, if not completely unexpected.
He has protected this city in times that I don't know if the city of Houston will ever see the challenges that we've seen, from social justice issues to a city shutting down to domestic violence at levels that we'll probably never see, historical highs. He has always answered our call, always.
Panel, in explaining the hard call, Mayor Whitmire said assessing culpability for the decade of case abandonment was robbing the department of focus and distracting officers from their core mission of crime fighting. All right, folks, let's talk about this. Tamara Bell, I know you are a supporter and good friend of Troy Finner. I'm guessing you don't think he was treated fairly here.
Let me be clear about this. When mayors come in, they change leadership. I never, ever thought Whitmire was keeping Troy. At the forum that we had at West Gray, when he was point blank asked that question, he said, and I quote, "He will be the police chief when I am elected." And he would be, because he couldn't fire him because he hadn't been sworn in. But I did not believe he was going to keep him. But more so than anything, he said that he was sickened when he saw the email. Well, many in the African American community and in other communities across this city were sickened when they read his tweet saying that Troy Finner was retiring. He was replacing him with Larry Satterwhite, and he believed in Satterwhite. Not one thing about the 34 years of public service, not one thing about his dedication to Houston and community. Not one thing about how, for most, he's been the best police chief going back to Lee Brown. Nothing about that. And then to say he retired and then say in the next breath, you were sickened by this email. And let's talk about the email. Because you see, the email that was sent to Acevedo and that Troy Finner was copied along with other chiefs, it said that they were using this supplemental lack of personnel. They said the word, and he said this is unacceptable. Acevedo didn't say nothing. The Victorian person on there, nobody else said anything about it. How would he know that this was a code being used in investigation to not do cases? Because as Larry Satterwhite said when he was interviewed at his first interview, I do patrol, I don't do investigation, I don't know nothing about it. And Mario Diaz said that's the same thing Finner said. And y'all take it from there.
All right, Paul Castro, by necessity and choice, you speak for victims now.
Yeah.
Give us your take here.
Every victim I've talked to is disappointed that this happened. We have had nothing but support from Chief Finner. He came out, he personally would get involved, keep us updated during our different investigations, took a personal interest in making sure justice was found. This is one of those things where it's a management issue. A lot of people who haven't been managers of large organizations don't understand how often they give directives to people and sometimes just assume that thing that I said would happen is happening, and they let it go and they assume that delegation equals getting it done. There was no cover-up. There was no intent behind anything Chief Fenner did. Everything he did was strictly around coming back on the backside and finding out that thing that I said would get done and expected it to get done did not get done, and I don't think he should have been held accountable the way he has.
Charles Blaine, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you see a scandal in a large organization, you see a high-profile departure like this. We see this in the private sector, we see it in the public sector as a way to reassure people that change is happening. But I don't think we can be reassured just yet, because the thing that remains is that 3 police chiefs, 3 mayors, countless city council members, and countless people throughout HPD over the past 8 years have heard of this issue, knew of this issue, or recently maybe learned of it, but nothing has changed. We still don't know who ignored the directive and how they're going to be held responsible, and we don't know who knew that people were ignoring the directive and then didn't say anything about that and maybe held that close to their vest. And those are answers that need to be answered in order to feel more confident about HPD moving forward.
Bill King, you've run big operations and had to make tough calls. Was the right one made here?
Well, I think it's a tough decision. First of all, I know Troy pretty well too, and he's a very honorable person. He's a dedicated public service to this community, and I wish him the best in his retirement. And he's a fine, outstanding human being. Look, the problem is when you're at the top of an organization, you represent that organization, and for better or for worse, the buck stops there. And right now, I think the public in Houston has lost confidence in HPD. And I think the mayor's have to bring in somebody from outside. I normally don't like that, but I think in this case, the level of distrust is so deep, I think we have to bring in somebody from outside. It's unfortunate that Troy happened to get caught in these circumstances.
All right, hold that thought. Still to come, a stormy week in the hush money trial of former President Donald Trump. But up next, picking the new top cop in the Bayou City. Who best to succeed Troy Fenner as chief of HPD? We're going to hear from Holly.
We're hoping to take a step forward and start moving away from the way we're doing things now and be honest with the public and get things worked out so that we will have the confidence of the public again.
HPOU will not play any primary role. It'll be my decision, and I'm not ruling out internal or external chiefs. I want someone that is a crime fighter, that realizes and appreciates the diversity of our city, and just wants to fix things.
Both the mayor and police union president Doug Griffiths discussing the process of choosing Chief Fenner's permanent replacement, a process that is already underway. Panel, I do not believe interim Chief Satterwhite is in serious contention. I do believe inquiries have been made to Dallas PD Chief Eddie Garcia and potentially Daniel Como, DEA special agent in charge for the Houston division and a former HPD officer. During our discussions here, you have been a big advocate for the victims as well, and I wanted to get your take on the Fenner removal.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we first talked about this on the show months ago, one thing I said is that I didn't see how Fenner survived this scandal. And that wasn't a reflection on whether or not Fenner was ultimately culpable for it. It was just a reflection of the political realities. Fenner not only presided over the department while this is happening, he's also very closely tied to former Mayor Sylvester Turner, not popular in the city these days. So that was pretty much inevitable. But one thing that struck me that Whitmire said that I think really resonated with the people of Houston is he said he was shocked that in all this time of all these people using this code, no one came forward. No one came to city council, no one sounded the alarm, and no one called attention to it. So I think inevitably it does have to be someone from outside, because what we're talking about is a culture now within the department. Some great people there. Fenner was very much liked by the community, certainly an honorable man. I think everyone agrees on that. But there has to be some dramatic cultural change there in order for the community to have trust in the department.
It is no secret that occasionally Bill King's phone rings, and on the other end is John Whitmire. I will ask you this. Is there any way they can hire from within? Because frankly, everybody in this command structure would have to go through a vetting process of how much they knew and when. Bill?
If I were asked that question, I would say no. Let me tell you, here's the ironic thing about this entire scandal. The scandal is not that they had a code that documented what they were doing. The scandal is the fact that they were doing it at all. And that was going on long before there was ever a code. And by the way, it goes on in every major department in the country. You know, ironically, the fact that they put a code on it for the first time gave us some idea to be able to quantify how many cases are dropped. You know, ironically, it actually gave us some dimensions. Now, look, we've known for a long time that the numbers are terrible because you look at the clearance rates. I mean, burglaries, it's 6 to 8%. You know, if you're a burglar, you got a 92 to 94% chance of getting away with it. I mean, look, I would have thought 6 to 8% of the burglars walked in and gave themselves up. You know, I mean, you can't be doing anything to only solve 6 to 8% of the burglaries. So to me, the problem is how do we start actually catching the people that are committing the crimes?
Okay, you heard the mayor say that the union would not play a primary role in picking the chief. You believe that? We got 20 seconds.
I hope that that is true, because one thing about it is when you have an internal affairs investigation, none of this is supposed to leak out. And from what I've been heard, it's being leaked out by members of the union. And you all said the person that was the executive chief over the investigations during this time, Troy was over patrol. The chief over this was a guy named Matt Slinkard at that time. And from what Greg just said and what Bill said, and nobody said it, Whitmire was interviewed and he said that he couldn't believe nobody told him about this. And when he said that, I think he was speaking about the union, that nobody in there said anything about it because it was obvious Troy had told them to stop using it and did not know they had continued.
All right, we're leaving it there. When we come back, throwing financial shade at Mayor John Whitmire's labor deal with Houston firefighters. Could serious opposition be brewing on council? This week, Houston Controller Chris Hollins addressed the city's finances as they relate to a $1 billion-plus labor settlement negotiated by Mayor John Whitmire with firefighters. The deal provides $650 million in back pay for the 7 years the first responders worked without a contract and guarantees wage hikes and benefits over the next 5 years, aimed at making the department more competitive. As for the analysis from Hollins, let's just say it was not well received by either the mayor or the firefighters.
It does disappoint me that the very Monday after they saved lives over the weekend, words matter, that people were trashing their future compensation. Even made the comment that if the city would have paid them more in the last 8 years, we wouldn't be looking at such a debt.
Woo! Panel, under Mayor Turner, the city racked up a huge, totally foreseeable debt, waged a losing court battle, and it now appears some on council want to dictate terms. All right, Charles, you've been watching what's going on pretty closely. There are a lot of questions on council.
Yeah, there have been. And I think, when you watch this press conference, Controller Hollins laid out what he felt were 6 scenarios that gave you different settlements than what the mayor presented. And so he was trying to say that his ranged from like $300 million to $380 million. So his argument was that it could be less. But I think the problem is kind of what you just said, is that without much information, you get people trying to fill the gaps with things. And so there really isn't much information the administration has put out because they are in negotiations and they don't want to get ahead of that or get ahead of the judge. But because of that, council has a lot of questions. And then you have now the controller filling in the gaps. We've had 2 budget fiscal affairs / labor committee hearings on this. Not much more information has come out even during those meetings. I mean, there still have always been more questions than answers. And I think that's the problem. When you don't have something to present, you're going to keep getting more questions than answers.
Bill, you looked at the Hollins presentation. Your thoughts?
So look, the comptroller and the council absolutely have a role here in reviewing this transaction. I have no problem with that. They need to. The fact that they didn't do it in the old administration is what I find irritating. So I have no problem with them questioning this deal, especially because the size of it's huge. I found Hollins' presentation, there were a couple what were apparently serious problems with me. First of all, there's a footnote that says we didn't look at potential litigation outcomes. Well, that's the whole question here. The Whitmire administration was faced with going to trial in the middle of March on this, and the union was claiming $1.3 billion. Now, they wouldn't have got 1.3, but what would they have gotten? Now, nobody knows. And unless you're in there trying to discount what that likely outcome was, that's the whole point of this exercise. The other thing that I thought was kind of silly about his presentation, it only looked at starting salaries. Well, starting salaries are paid to about 5% of the fire department, and that's at $52,000. The average pay is like $80,000 or $90,000, and you have to add benefits on top that goes way over $100,000. So using $52,000 as your multiplier is going to give you really, low settlement values. The other thing is, and this is really significant, this settlement was structured so that the back pay was overtime and not regular back pay. That means that the city does not have to make the pension contribution, which is 31%. So if they would have won a $650 million back pay settlement, add over $200 million, and Hollins' analysis did not seem to account for that at all.
Tamara Bell, you are a businesswoman, and this deal has been presented as a pretty good deal. Your thoughts?
My thoughts was that it might have been presented as a pretty good deal, but when you look at the people that was in the room when the deal was made, you didn't have anybody with the finance and the controllers of somebody to look at this before you got there, and then that has been weeks ago, and you still don't have the data. You don't sign no checks. You don't know why they're being written. It needs to be broken down, and City Council needs to see, and I said it before and I say it again, the voters need to vote on this. This is a lot of debt. This is debt that will be in there for over 30 years to just do this and say, well, oh, the hell with the voters. No, you need to have that done that way. And the City Council members need to have this looked at. And they have not looked at, they've not been given this to look at as of yet.
Paul, Mayor Whitmire said it was part of his mandate by election, overwhelming margin, to get this settled. You agree?
I know that every voter I talked to said that they knew that this is what the mayor was going to do, and the fact that he's doing it is not a surprise to any of them. This wasn't something that he came in under the table with. I do think that the timing of Hollins' report was suspect in that, this is the same group that was just in Kingwood saving people and in Atascocita. So for that to come out the way it did, I think was politically odd, but I also think that most people believed this is what the mayor was going to do.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Up next, serious signals from the new head of Houston Metro. Could the deep pockets of the transit system help the city ride out tough financial challenges? Welcome back. With the City of Houston's budget challenges in mind, I present my most intriguing comment of the week. I didn't make it. And it comes from Houston Metro Chair Elizabeth Gonzalez-Brock.
We shouldn't be looking at this being Metro's money or city's money. We should be looking at it as the taxpayers' money, and how can we use the taxpayers' money to address our needs. And instead of looking at ways to increase taxes or increase fees, look at what we have today. We need to be responsible with the dollars we have in front of us.
Intriguing, because the city gives Metro sales tax revenue of around $1 billion a year. And with those boondoggle dedicated bus lane projects likely to be spiked, Metro is in position to help city government claw out of challenging financial times. Agree or disagree, Bill King?
Well, I agree. When Metro was set up in the 1970s, the city gave up half of its sales tax revenue to Metro. It's currently running about $1 billion a year. Over the life of Metro, the city has given up about $22 billion of sales tax revenue. If the city had that revenue, we wouldn't have any financial issues in the city. Now, the 2019 referendum, there are three things in that. One was they authorized 12 projects to be built, subject to future due diligence. They said we want to keep the bus service up and actually increase the services there. And we're going to give 25% back to the constituent cities. The problem is there's not enough money to do that. There never was. But those 12 projects are probably $20 billion or something now. You can't do all three of those anymore. And none of those projects are proving themselves out in the due diligence. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to spend more money fixing streets, we're going to spend more money running a really good bus service and get rid of these vanity projects, which mostly benefit the engineers and consultants.
I want to give Charles 30 seconds to talk about one of the messages here is let's not raise taxes until we figure out how to spend our money efficiently.
Yeah, I can co-sign that message every day, and I do appreciate her saying that. And I like that they're talking about shifting projects over to Metro to kind of free up money from the city. I would like to see money just taken from Metro and given to the city and used appropriately to handle some of those issues. But I do appreciate the conversation. I think part of the issue here, though, is it's similar to what we're talking about with the firefighter issue. There's this kind of lack of communication, which you have a lot of the transit folks who are upset about things. They'd probably still be upset if Metro was communicating to them, but Metro isn't really doing the communication. And Bill mentioned the referendum. We'll go out and communicate to the people why you are now changing it. Why are you doing something differently? And I think that's what's missing in this.
Jump in here tomorrow.
One of the things that Elizabeth, that's my friend, said that I love was that look at what you got. And it's the same thing I said at the city before they started talking about what they didn't have. Look at the money you have. It's not the city's money, it's not Metro money. Look at what you got, and it's all taxpayer money, and see what we can do with it and figure things out. That is accounting 101. And I'm very glad to hear her say that, because if you're still looking at pockets and pockets and pockets, you don't know what somebody is hiding behind that back pocket. So I like it that you're gonna look at all pockets. I love it.
Paul, thoughts?
I just think that one of the biggest things we have to figure out is what do we have to prioritize if that money is not going to stretch, as Bill said. I do think it's a responsibility of today's mayor, today's administration to solve tomorrow's problems, because at this point we need that.
Final word to Holly. You heard the conversation.
Yeah, and I think taxpayers get really tired of saying, well, this only goes in this compartment, and this goes in that compartment. We've got our, Economic Development Corporation and Metro and all these little pockets, and then we're hearing from John Whitmire that the city is broke, and we're looking at a fiscal cliff, and people are looking for solutions and no more finger pointing.
We'll keep our eye on it. Still ahead, after some of the worst flooding since Hurricane Harvey, a Harris County commissioner calling on neighbors to the north to be neighborly in the battle against rising water.
The reason I chose now is people don't really want to talk about flooding until you are flooded. And if we're not willing to do anything now, I guess we're not willing to do anything at all.
In the wake of damaging high water inundating communities like Kingwood and Huffman, Harris County Precinct 3 Commissioner Tom Ramsey reaching out aggressively to leaders in neighboring Montgomery and Liberty counties. His message? Initiate reasonable floodwater detention projects and mitigation standards to safeguard both their own residents and the millions of Texans living downstream. Ramsey contends undeniable population growth in Montgomery County and the emergence of the Colony Ridge community in Liberty County have generated new and potentially dangerous flood control challenges for the region and must be addressed. What happens if we do nothing?
We will continue to flood. The property values of people will continue to go down, and people will no longer want to move to Harris County.
Panel Commissioner Ramsey says if the neighboring counties and San Jacinto River Authority are unwilling to partner on solutions, the state may need to intervene with its authority. Holly, I know you cover this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, sorry. I agree with what Ramsey said. One thing we looked at last year was the possibility of creating a regional flood authority. Harris County has the only county controlled flood control district in the state, and it really doesn't make sense because we're talking about a flood zone, a river basin, and what happens north of us is going to affect Harris County and Houston. And Colony Ridge, they haven't had good flood control. We looked at some of the ways that they constructed the drainage ditches, and it's a danger not just for flooding, but also may jeopardize the water supply for Houston and Harris County. I talked to Representative Dennis Paul, who last year filed a bill to try to make some changes there. He said he's going to refile that bill, and what they're looking at to start the process is, first of all, wrest control of the Harris County Flood Control District away from Commissioner's Court and put it under the governor as a state-appointed board. But we really have got to look at it as a multi-county approach. You've got to address Colony Ridge, you've got to address drainage in both Liberty County, Montgomery County, and all the way up the San Jacinto River.
Bill, you talk to a guy named Bob Rehak all the time, and he's kind of just a great student and resource for the community on flooding. What's your take on what Ramsey said?
Yeah, listen, if you don't follow Bob's website, you should. It's Reduce Flooding Now, I think, and he's just done an incredible job documenting the flooding up along the San Jacinto River basin. Look, we absolutely need a regional flood authority. I mean, this is not a county problem. It is a problem that covers an entire watershed. The devil's going to be in how do you govern that, who's going to be in control, because, you know, these things affect different places differently. So that's going to have to all be sorted out. Be a lot of sausage making going on there. But I think the state ought to take it over, not just for Harris County, but for the entire region. And we need to have a regional flood control
We've got a
authority.
secret weapon. We'll send Charles to lobby Brandon Creighton. Go ahead, Tamara.
Listen, first off, I'm so sorry that you all have went through this, but listen, the governor was correct. If you all don't contact them and let them know that you're flooded, you are not going to get federal funds for the declaration of disaster. And that is critically important in situations like this. This is how you could get funding to maybe reduce and mitigate the future flooding. But you all are not anywhere near the $700,000 that y'all need to get to. So you all need to please make sure y'all go to the government and make sure you put in that you were impacted by this disaster.
Couple seconds.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everybody. Regional flood authority is good. I mean, when you look at San Jacinto River Authority's priorities, it's keeping water on the lake for recreation and selling water. When you look at Harris County, it's keeping water out of homes. And so when you have differing priorities, you're not going to get better resolutions. You know, we have, and for the time being, we have the Houston-Galveston Area Council Regional Flood Commission. Maybe put Commissioner Ramsey and the council member from Kingwood, Fred Flickinger, in charge of that and let them run it. I mean, in the meantime, until we get something that's actually regional and can address this.
Okay, it's like Monopoly. I just passed go, got more time. Paul, any?
Oh, I just think that this is something that a parent, you know, thank you, Commissioner Ramsey, for speaking up about this. I have friends in Kingwood, and every time it rains, they freak out. The fact that this most recent storm really came out of nowhere. It was unpredicted. They didn't see it until Wednesday. All of a sudden, it's dropping 23 inches of rain within the river basin. That's very problematic. I think our problem is we're looking to the past to try to solve tomorrow's problems. The problems that we're generating, every acre we pave, every new community we build is just going to pour more water into the basin. That's a problem.
I've got a question for Bill, you know, and it could be a situation that's exacerbating the situation, which was a change in philosophy at Harris County, which allotted flood control dollars based upon equity or lack of equity in the past, and kind of a reparation for not making the, I guess, equitable investments in the past. Bill, your thoughts?
Yeah, look, the flooding needs to be based on where the houses are being flooded. That's where it needs to be, and that's the only criteria it needs to be. I don't care if they're rich houses or poor houses. We need to, and the other thing, frankly, look, I'm sorry, but we built things in a lot of places in this region that we shouldn't have built them. Just shouldn't have built them there. And so I'm all in favor of buyouts. If people want to get out of these things, let's buy them out. But when you buy it out, tear down the property and nothing ever gets built there again.
right.
You know?
Preach. Still to come. The bid to boot foreign students busting the law during campus chaos. A Texas congresswoman says deportation should be the penalty for hate speak aimed at America or Israel. But up next, the state's third largest school district cutting out curriculum. Its elected leaders deem controversial.
I do not support this amendment. We should go back to the original motion, which is to accept the instructional materials as approved by the educators who reviewed the materials, who are experts in these fields of biology, environmental science, earth systems, principles of education and training, and health science theory.
Cy-Fair ISD board member Julie Heineman waging a losing battle to keep previously approved academic material from being yanked out of the district's curriculum by conservative trustees. Ultimately, the board voted to remove multiple chapters from textbooks, including material on controversial topics like vaccines, cultural diversity, and climate change. Panel material to be removed at Cy-Fair was previously approved by a state board of education dominated by conservative members. So what should we make of this additional culling at the third largest district in Texas, Holly Hansen?
Yeah, I spoke to one of the board members yesterday, board member Blassingame. And first of all, you need to understand is that the local districts, they get to choose the curriculum that their district's going to use. It's not imposed by the state. There's just certain standards they must meet. She told me that not all of these books were actually approved by the State Board of Education. And what they did is they looked at the actual text. They're the elected members of the board. They read through some of these texts and they found that there were some chapters that were very heavy-handed with political statements incorporated into the text. And, conservative people who live in Cy-Fair have been very vocal over the past few years and past few election cycles. They flipped this board because they do want board members that will listen to parent concerns. So one of the concerns was in one of these books that there's 2 chapters about vaccines. One chapter is, what we probably all studied growing up. The second one was a very heavy-handed political statement about COVID shots. In other cases, they're promoting zero population growth and, some of these things that are more controversial and not the more neutral scientific information we'd want conveyed to our students. So they're answering to their constituency in this, and, that's their prerogative, and that's what they have to answer to.
Paul Castro, like it or not, this is in your wheelhouse. What do you make?
Education is political. As Holly said, school boards get the responsibility to decide what instructional materials are used in schools. Elections have consequences. So there were 14% of the elected eligible voters in Cy-Fair voted at the last school board election. There were 2,000 votes or so separating the first and second place votes. It didn't go to runoffs. I don't think anybody got over 50% of their votes. And so if members of that community choose for their community to have a broader, more liberal way of looking at the curriculum, then they need to get out and vote. But this is exactly as designed. The State Board of Education selected materials that were allowable, passed it down to school boards get to select, and whether people like it or not is less important than this is the process that we use.
Anything that sets off your alarm bells, Bill King?
I don't know. I read all the media reports on it. Of course, the media immediately pounced on this. Until I see what material was actually removed, I'd want to withhold judgment. But I do want to follow something that Paul said, which is the turnout in these school board elections is just awful. I just went and voted in the Spring Branch school board election with 7% turnout. Part of that's because school districts make it difficult to vote in these elections. I would like to see the state require school districts, water districts, all these special groups to have their elections on a standard election day run by the county clerk, so you can go in there and get all your voting done at once. This last time I went and voted, I had to go look for the HCAD election and then go look for the Spring Branch election. Now, most people are not going to do that.
All right, we're leaving it there. When we come back, Joe Biden's fine line on Israel and its war with Hamas. Can the president withhold offensive weapons and still claim to be the Jewish state's biggest ally?
They go into Rafah. I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah.
President Joe Biden confirming to CNN his intention to shut off transport of offensive weaponry to Israel, including shipments of 2,000-pound and 500-pound bombs used to penetrate Hamas tunnels. While he says that he's concerned about the potential for mass civilian casualties in densely packed Rafah, Republicans on Capitol Hill are loudly objecting.
This is obscene. It is absurd. Give Israel what they need to fight the war they can't afford to lose.
Panel Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says with or without U.S. support, his nation will not be deterred from seeking out and wiping out the remnants of Hamas in Rafah. And there we are, Holly.
Yeah. This looks like the president trying to micromanage how Israel is running the war. And of course, with the U.S. contributing to Israel's support, he does have that leeway. But he's micromanaging from within the safety of the White House and not the reality of what the Israelis are dealing with on a daily basis. And, their goal is to eradicate this threat Whether or not this is the best strategy for them, I can't speak to. And of course, they are fighting a proxy war with Iran. But it's very disturbing to have the U.S. have promised certain things and now saying, well, we don't like what you're doing with what we've promised. And to some extent, some of the materials he's blocking would undermine the what stated goal of waging a more humane war, because he's taking away some of the equipment that would allow them to be very targeted and very precise in what they're doing. So
Tomorrow.
It's undermining.
Tomorrow I'm taking you back to the streets of Gary.
There you go.
And if they try to tell you can't have the weapons you need to win that fight.
Okay, this is a problem. You don't break your word. Okay, and you don't need to be telling, the U.S. don't need to be telling anybody how to do a war. As I've said before, when 9/11 happened, we attacked Iraq, the wrong country. And we didn't say, oh, we don't want any civilians killed. Oh, we got to look out for the kids. We do that. When we went after bin Laden, if his kids was in that house when they came after them, they was just going to be next. So how you going to sit up here and tell them, oh, we going to give it to you, but then the president say, no, Congress has voted for this. You need to let this go before you go back take that second nap. You need to go on and let them send this out and stop doing Israel like this, because you promised it to them.
Months away from presidential election. Is this a potential landmine for Joe Biden?
Well, that's exactly the point I was going to make. He's dancing this line and there's no way to win. So you have the vocal minority of the base, which wants him to kind of turn his back on Israel. But then you have the Jewish mega donor base that's saying that they want more. There was this week an email was sent from one of the Jewish mega donors to the White House telling him that he wanted him to change course. The Jewish Democratic majority came out with a statement saying that they don't know what the political consequences will be if he turns his back on them. And so it's this fine line that he's trying to dance, and I don't know how you exactly win that. And I do think this could emerge to be a bigger issue, as well as the border, than the perceived issue of abortion on the Republican side. I think with those two things, it's going to make it really hard for him heading into November.
Paul, 20 seconds. Thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think this is helping any. I think he should pick a lane, stay in the lane. And the lane he's chosen is to support Israel. And in vacillating and going backwards, my concern is he's making nobody happy, because nobody on the pro-Palestinian side is going to give him credit for this.
All right, leaving it there. Up next, the lurid story of a president and a porn star playing out in a New York courthouse. But can prosecutors convince a jury an actual crime was committed amid all that bad behavior? A porn star and a former president in the same New York courtroom this week as the hush money trial of Donald Trump claws painfully forward. I say painfully because testimony in this case is hard to stomach, including details of Trump's alleged sexual liaison with Stormy Daniels. Mercifully, we will spare you and instead move to the critical nature of the upcoming testimony of Mr. Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, who will tell jurors the former president falsified business records by laundering the hush money payments as legal expenses. Panel, it's a word of a convicted felon versus a defendant who has been found liable for sexual abuse by a jury in civil court. Gosh. Who do you believe, Holly?
I don't know. Look, it's hard to know, but what they've created here is a salacious spectacle over this alleged, one-night hookup. I refuse to call it an affair if that's what actually happened. But what we're talking about is, whether or not a crime can be proven in the state law. It's a misdemeanor, and they're trying to escalate it to a felony, and it's a little vague as to how they're getting to that point. And and then they have to prove that that was the intent, that it was. The intent was related to the presidential campaign. When you had it was David Pecker testified that he'd done that for Trump long before his presidential ambitions, and for many other celebrities and wealthy persons who try to control the narrative and protect their image in the public. It sounds really problematic. And with this crazy testimony that went on this week, thank God we're not talking about details. There's a good chance we're going to see another Harvey Weinstein situation where you end up with a problematic outcome.
Okay, watch this.
Yep.
Only lawyer on the panel. He has to talk about this. Look, Bill, you called this a weak case to begin with. Have you heard anything that connects the dots?
I still think it's a weak case, and I do think it's selective prosecution. I don't think there's any doubt about that. They've proven that he's a sleazebag, and they've proven that he's a pathological liar, but those are not crimes. The political question to me is this ever going to start cutting into the evangelical base. And just from talking to my evangelical friends and family members, you know, they're beginning to sort of get fed up with the guy, and that's showing up in the polling a little bit. If he loses that at all, you know, it can make a big difference in the election. But I just don't understand how evangelicals can stand by this guy when you see this kind of stuff going on. I don't get it.
Final 30 to you tomorrow.
This is Trump's. This is what the song playing in his head. It's hard out here for a pimp. So he is in a whole another world on this because, as Holly said, she was just one of the row. I agree with you. This was not an affair. This was like, Captain Saberho got an hour. You available? Okay. I said so. I mean it. And as Bill said, for them to still be following this fool, what more does he have to show you? He does not care. But I thank the state of New York for dragging him in where he don't want to be. How many gag orders he got that he done violated? 20? He don't care.
All right, Paul and Charles can thank me later. Up next, the move to eject foreign students involved in campus chaos, hate speak, and law breaking, right back to the country they came from. On tonight's edition of Texas The Issue Is, airing at 9:45 right here on Fox 26, we talked to Congresswoman Beth Van Dyne about her legislative bid to mandate deportation of foreign students found to have broken the law during pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel protests.
There's one thing to say it, but there's another thing actually to commit a crime on a university campus. But if you are here from a foreign country and you're spewing hatred against the American people and you're spewing hatred against the Jewish people and you're supporting terrorist activities and you're committing a crime while doing it, I don't think you deserve to stay in this country. And this is what this bill promotes.
All right, Holly, legitimate legislation or showboating?
Hard to say. I mean, I think committing a crime is the key word here. So if anybody's committing a crime and they're, here on one of these student visas, they absolutely should be expelled. And I think that's already the law. And you change it up if it's an American student in another country. Boy, they bring the hammer down on misbehaving students. And I think it's an appropriate response.
Oh yeah, Charles, I'm coming to you.
We can't even find and deport the people who are already here illegally, and now we're going to spend extra resources doing this. I mean, I get the sentiment. I think she's just responding to what we're seeing in the media. But I mean, how about we fix the actual issue first, and then we can focus on this?
20 seconds.
Let me tell you, if I was one of those parents whose child did not get to graduate because of COVID in 2020 and my baby was supposed to graduate in 2024 and your ass was out there protesting, blocking graduation, I'd beat the hell out of you. They wouldn't get to deport you.
Yeah, definitely. I think anyone who violates the law, especially if it's any kind of violent protest or someone who's doing anything that physically is stopping the normal course of action in business, they can go home.
Final word, 20 seconds.
I think it's already the law. If you violate the law while you're on a student visa, you get deported.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Thanks to this week's panel, and thank you for joining us. Now you have a choice. Fox News Sunday is next on the broadcast channel, and we'll keep talking here with What's Your Point Overtime, streaming live on Fox Local and on our website as we dive deeper into local, state, and national politics. With all of that said, from all of us here, have a safe and healthy week and a wonderful Mother's Day.